On the broadcast, I'm joined by Professor R. Gangakhetkar, one of India's best-known epidemiologists. He's been the head scientist of the Indian Council for Medical Research. We're joined on this broadcast by Dr. Soumitra Das, Director of the National Institute of Biomedical Genomics, and Dr. Rakesh Mishra, Director, CSIR Center for Molecular and Cellular Biology in Hyderabad, and Dr. Shahid Jamil, virologist and the CEO of the Wellcome Trust Alliance. Now, what we hope to do, remember there are 10 institutes where genome sequencing is happening at this time in India. And what we hope to do over the next several minutes is spend some time understanding the nature of the enemy that all of us are dealing with. How has the nature of the enemy changed from earlier to now? What are the new changes that are being noticed? There is now talk of a triple mutant Bengal variant as well. Does this make the virus more lethal? We know that it makes it more infectious for certain. And how do we need to approach dealing with this variant of the coronavirus? Take a look at this initial report by my colleague and India Today's health correspondent Sneha Mordani, and then we'll dive straight into the issue of the nature of the enemy we're dealing with and try and understand from these top medical experts how the genome sequencing of that virus is changing and how that impacts your life and mine.
Even 5% samples can't go for genome sequencing, says the head of India's disease control program, even as the worst hit states in India battle mutants. Ever since the country started to genome sequence using the network of 10 labs, less than 1% of the samples have been sequenced. Woefully low, say experts.
You need sequencing on a large scale, like at least 10% of your cases, to know what kinds of variants. And you need to sequence to know that are your lockdown measures, are your containment measures just reducing the old variant, or is it actually reducing the new contagious variants? Because new contagious variants, especially P1, is 2 times more contagious and is much more difficult to control. But without sequencing, you cannot make any claim.
The government is throwing its hand up in the air at a time when variants are replicating and mutating, leading to visible mayhem. By the government's own admission, the presence of the highly transmissible UK variant, the B.1.17 variant, has almost doubled in a span of less than a month in Delhi. It was seen in 28% of the samples in the first week of March, and this doubled to 50% towards the end of March. The assessment perhaps explained the exponential surge in cases of COVID in Delhi. The centre says the number of UK variant detected in Delhi has doubled. For example, in the first week of March, 28% samples showed the UK variant. In the fourth week of March, more than 50% of the samples were of the UK variant. Out of the 2,521 samples sequenced in Delhi, 13% samples found to be having the UK variant. 3% had the Indian variant, which is the double mutant variant. Meanwhile, in the state of Maharashtra, the presence of the double mutation variant has outnumbered the UK variant. Out of the 1,700 samples sequenced in Maharashtra, 24.8% of them had the Indian variant, which is the double mutant variant. About 1.7% were found to be having the UK variant. A triple mutation has been detected in West Bengal, scientists have confirmed. Genome sequencing is imperative to understand the manner in which the mutating variants are behaving, to understand the kind of impact that they are causing vis-a-vis the severity of the infection. It is unlocking the COVID code. Fighting a pandemic without doing adequate genome sequencing is almost like fighting an unknown enemy, somebody you know nothing about. The fight then becomes even more dangerous. In New Delhi, Sneha Mordani for India Today.
Joining me on this special edition of the News Track, Dr. R. Gangakhetkar, formerly with the ICMR. We have Soumitra Das, Director of the National Institute of Biomedical Genomics in Kalyani. We have Dr. Rakesh Mishra, Director at the Center for Cellular and Molecular Biology, Hyderabad. Dr. Shahid Jamil, virologist and CEO of the Wellcome Trust India Alliance. I want to go across to Dr. Ganga Khetkar because you have emerged as the face of the first phase of the coronavirus through all the briefings that you did, Dr. Ganga Khetkar, in your capacity as the head scientist then of the ICMR. You've now been looking at how the nature of this virus is changing. What, according to you, has changed so dramatically between the first wave that India confronted to now, which has made this virus so much more easily transmissible and so much more dangerous?
One needs to remember that if we look at the transmission dynamics of this virus, perhaps this virus didn't have that kind of ability to mutate so rapidly compared to other organisms which we know of, like HIV and influenza. But one of the things that tends to happen is we tend to put up a huge pressure on that virus to mutate. The sole reason is the virus's ability to replicate is little error prone, and that's why the more number of times the virus is going to replicate, the more will be the errors which are called as mutations. Now, when that starts happening, you will realize if you actually look at the kind of mutants that have come across in the world, one thing which you start realizing is this is happening largely because, in one place you have a stronger incidence of COVID-19. And then when it comes down, you find somewhere in the world, there is another strong incidence of COVID that's happening. And during that strong incidence, you essentially find that the virus is able to mutate more, infecting large number of bodies, because with death, the virus also tends to die, and it would have a limited period for it to mutate then. And since it is occurring, if you look at the sequences, earlier it was England, then subsequently we talked of South Africa, then Brazil, and also now American ones. These are the countries where the wave was on upsurge. So it is not a big surprise that you would see another variant coming up in India, mainly because, the surge itself will ensure that the virus will have an ability to mutate rapidly, which was not there biologically otherwise. And in addition, you have some other practices which perhaps can put a selection pressure, like you use convalescent plasma repeatedly. You are exposing the virus to different titers of neutralizing antibodies, and then these titers in some areas would be ineffective, may not be so strong, and certain would be more, and you are adding larger spectrum of these neutralizing antibodies because you have host which produces it, and then you have collected from somebody who is donating that convalescent plasma. So essentially you put pressure there. You may have used different antivirals which may not be so effective, and naturally it gives an opportunity for that virus to actually go on and mutate against those selection pressures. And I think that is becoming far more critical now, just because our incidence is high. US incidence has now started dropping from where it was. So you are getting imported viruses from different strains because the entire world is a global village. And when you get that new variant, you will add more mutations to it. And therefore, these mutations would become important and a threat to everybody.
Okay, Dr. Rakesh Mishra, yours is amongst the laboratories where genome sequencing is indeed taking place in India. Give our viewers a sense of, what the results of the genome sequencing that you've been carrying out at your labs is showing you about the different viruses and their strains which are at play in India, and the differences between each of these strains.
Right, thank you. So there are several variants of concern that are going around, and important thing is that different regions of the country have different variants of concern. For example, in Delhi and Punjab, we have more, probably in Haryana and UP, but more data is required for that. It's the UK variant, which is the dominant variant, and some of there may be a double variant, but is B.1.617. While in Maharashtra, it is mainly the double variant, and a small fraction, maybe less than 10% are around that triple variant. Triple variant is not in West Bengal, that is wrongly projected. Triple variant is one more variant, is in fact a sub-lineage of 617, which is double variant, which is mainly in Maharashtra. Similarly, in West Bengal, there is totally unrelated variant, which is B.1.618, which is totally unrelated, and it's about 10-20%, depending upon the data we can fix at, about 20%. So that is about the north and west of India. In the south of India, you have largely N440K, which is there for some time, and this dominant variant in Andhra, Karnataka, Kerala, in this part of the country. Here in the south, we have very little UK variant and double mutant, what we say. So one thing is very simple, as you just now heard, that this virus are like many other viruses, particularly coronaviruses or RNA viruses, have tendency to mutate fast, and this has been doing so. And we are having variety of variants emerging in different parts of the country. We are a large country. We are not the UK, like one small country. We have various things, but everywhere the cases are rising. So let us remember this, that variants is one thing which is a substance to rise the cases, but a common factor in the whole country is the lack of COVID appropriate behavior, why we have seen these many cases. UK variant is more infectious, double variant is more infectious, maybe 440K is more infectious. They will gradually replace the existing ones. But even today, as we talk, maybe more than half of the variants are, none of these variants are concerned, they are the regular variants. So we have to separate the two problems. One is new variants coming, they may pose new kind of problem, they have little more infectivity, and that's why they will become dominant. But the surge and the number of cases rising, there is a common factor which should be which we should focus on, how to break the chain of spread and how to stop that. More and more genome sequence, more and more metadata along with the genome sample what we are sequencing, we will understand better whether this virus will cause more symptoms, more mortality, they will create any problem for vaccine. Thankfully, so far, none of this seem to be there, so we are lucky in that. But considering the number of cases that we are having every day, considering the size of the country, we are running the risk of developing more variants on the platform of these fast spreading variants, and that is why we should be more concerned in the future, for which we have to take action now to stop the spread of the variant, stop the chain of the spread. That is very important.
Okay.
Variants
Dr. Soumitra Das, can you tell us what are the research findings that you are coming up with at the National Institute of Biomedical Genomics? You're doing a lot of genome testing yourself. How are you seeing the nature of this virus change from earlier? What are the maximum strains that you're picking up now? And is this new Indian mutant variant more, we know it's more infectious for certain, but is it more fatal than the virus that we were dealing with in the first phase?
Right. First of all, I would like to thank you for this opportunity to clarify certain things. Number one is this mutations in RNA virus is not a surprise. I mean, as Dr. Ganga Khetkar has rightly mentioned, that it is very obvious and it's very natural. But the thing is, it can be actually increased with the selection pressure, and also in sometimes when we have a situation which somehow gives advantage to the virus. Something of that Rakesh was mentioning, that COVID inappropriate behavior, which really help the virus to actually propagate more and then find out easily other hosts. Now, regarding what kind of sequencing we are doing it in NIBMG is actually coordinating the sequencing part of this INSACOG, which is a national consortium of 10 laboratories, sequencing laboratories, including, CCMB, what Rakesh was saying. So we try to coordinate all the sequence and try to analyze and find out whether there is new variant are coming or not. Now, as I was saying, that we keep on spotting new mutations, but it's very important that it has to be correlated epidemiologically and clinically with the disease outcome. Whether it is more infective or it is more severe can only certainly be told if we can have a clear correlations with the clinical and epidemiological data, which is we call metadata. Often we found that we actually struggle to align the two because of the lack of information of the metadata collected from remote places or hospitals. So once we find out that some mutations are actually accumulating and it's crossing a threshold. See, you mentioned about the 618 coming out in West Bengal. Yes, it was actually observed in mid-February and March, but now the data shows like it is in the declining, and it's actually plateaued for a while and now it is declining. So our data suggests that 617, which is actually more prominent, was in Maharashtra, is now picking up and somehow competing out the 618. So we need to watch out and see that we can correlate with the infectivity rate and the disease severity or the mortality. So that is very important. Now we can only attribute a particular mutations to have a clinical some implications if we have that data strong. That's basically which we call variant of concern. I would like to reiterate that till now the 617, which we are talking about this double mutant, but that's actually a colloquial. 617 actually had 3 mutations. I would like to clarify that issue also. 617, what we talk about that B1, 617 had 3 mutations. Which one was an E484K? Then you had this 452R, L452R. Along with there, you had the P681R. Now the first 2 mutations, the L452R and E484Q, was actually picked up because they were relevant in terms of immune escape. The third one, the 681R, actually gave some advantage for infectivity. So together, it's actually becomes a triple mutant. So the double and the triple mutant is actually one and the same. It's a misnomer to say it. So it's better that we adhere to a WHO nomenclature of the numbers rather than giving some local and popular names. So that's become confusing in the media. The second thing is about the West Bengal.
But Dr. Shahid Jamil, for those who didn't study virology, can you try and explain to our viewers why is it that 617 spreads more, is spreading to different parts of the country, whereas a 618, the doctor just told us, is actually declining, even though it started spreading in February and March, but now it's coming down. So how is it decided that what are the factors that play themselves out before one strain becomes the dominant strain, causes more damage than the others?
Well, as you have heard others say, Rahul, mutation is something very normal to a virus. When the virus multiplies, there are changes that happen, and these changes are random. There are both types of changes that are bad for the virus and changes that are good for the virus. Changes that are bad for the virus are never seen because those viruses never survive. What you actually see are viruses that have some advantage. So if the baby virus from the mother virus becomes little more infectious, so then that outcompetes other sister viruses. If you have a virus that has a change that can evade pre-existing immunity, then that has a selective advantage. So it's all about not just mutation, but also selective advantage somehow. And that is what is happening. So if you take 617, for example, 617 has 2 mutations that allow the virus to enter cells much better than viruses without that mutation. So when the virus enters cells better, it replicates better, it transmits better, and in a way we call it more infectious. There is another mutation in 617 that allows it to escape certain antibodies that neutralize the virus. So then that gives it the potential to evade immunity. So individually, these mutations may not do much, but when these mutations come together in the same virus, then you suddenly have a virus that can infect better and which can evade better. And that is something that can outcompete other viruses. So basically, this is what is happening. I mean, it's a very natural process. Let me add one other thing, Rahul, before I stop, that we are worried so much about double mutant, triple mutant, UK, South Africa, all of this. There is one way that will stop all mutations, and that is if we properly wear masks. That is a sure shot defense against all variants. So without worrying ourselves to death over variants, let's start wearing masks properly. Then we will cut down on transmission, and we will cut down on the generation of more mutant viruses, more variant viruses. I'll stop there.
That's an important point you make. Now, Dr. Ganga Khetkar, there are many people who have this question about why people who are being vaccinated, even if they've had double vaccines and a month has passed since the second vaccine, they're ending up getting reinfected. So, is there something that you're picking up about this new mutation or the Indian variant which makes it skip or evade antibodies in a way that even if your system built up some antibodies, you could still end up infected because that's just how the nature of the virus has changed?
No, absolutely not. No, I can emphatically say that there is no evidence to suggest that people are getting infected even after 2 dosages of vaccine through newer mutants as such. Not only here, but perhaps across the world. The sole reason that people tend to get infected is when they get vaccinated. We must remember that these vaccines are highly efficient when it comes to reducing the risk of development of severe COVID disease as well as death. But when it comes to preventing transmission, they tend to fall short because most of these vaccines are going through intramuscular route. And therefore, when the efficiency drops, and I tend to be exposed to some person who may be having COVID, I will acquire it even if I am vaccinated as such. There, can I blame the virus? Not at all. No, you have to blame yourself how you were exposed to in the given circumstances. Did I not follow the COVID appropriate behavior? And as Dr. Shahid rightly said, no, whether you are vaccinated, whether you are not vaccinated, whether there are variants, whether there is wild type virus that is in circulation, what is going to be your best defense against this particular mutants as well is going to be the mask. We need to continue to use the mask and not worry whether my vaccine is going to fail, because globally there is no evidence to suggest that the breakthrough mutants have been able to evade the vaccine successfully, which increases the chance of reinfection dramatically to be considered as a signal towards failure of vaccines. So trust the data, trust the fact that the simplest measure is COVID appropriate behavior, irrespective of your vaccine status. You don't need to get scared of these mutants. Don't divert the attention from adherence to COVID appropriate behavior out of fear. We don't need to panic with respect to mutants as such. That's a natural phenomena that will occur. We need to think, why am I not following the COVID appropriate behavior? And that's something which will help us overcome this issue. And this becomes extremely critical in second wave, because as I said, the more number of times the virus is going to replicate, the higher is the chance that it will accumulate more and more mutations over what it already has. And we need to avoid that by trying to break the chain of transmission by using COVID appropriate behaviors among 95% of the population or more.
No, but Dr. Shahid Jamil, when you came on the show the last time, I remember you saying that the South African variant in particular neutralized any antibodies the AstraZeneca vaccine may have created, that the AstraZeneca vaccine, that's also the serum vaccine in India, was virtually like water against it. And therefore, I ask you this question again, on the basis of all that you're picking up, have there been changes in the nature of the genome of the virus which make it jump or skip the antibodies that may have been created as a result of the vaccine process?
So let us dissect this into two parts, Rahul. Let me first address the South African variant. The South African variant has made two vaccines do rather poorly in clinical trials. One is the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, which is very similar to the AstraZeneca vaccine. And the other is the Novavax vaccine, which is a protein vaccine, which has not yet been licensed. Both of those vaccines showed very low efficacy when tested in South Africa compared to when they were tested in UK or US. And the reason was that in South Africa, this variant was quite rampant at that time. We have evidence now, both from India as well as elsewhere, that the UK variant is neutralized quite well by antibodies in the blood of people who are vaccinated with any vaccine. Rakesh Mishra's group has just produced some very early data to show that even this double mutant, which you call the 617, is neutralized quite effectively by the serum from people who got the Covishield vaccine. So South African variant is a variant of concern, but the other variants that we are seeing, thankfully so far, are not showing that potential. So yes, there are details to it.
Can you build on that, Dr. Mishra? And can you give us details of what your early research is showing about how the serum vaccine is efficacious against the 617 variant, and also what about the Bharat Biotech vaccine, the Covaxin?
Right. Yeah. So recently, ICMR has released data that they actually, in fact, interpreted the phase 3 trial, which is technically going on for the Covaxin, which is Bharat Biotech vaccine, and they show that it is effective against the double variant. What we have done is we have cultured double variant in the lab, and then we can set up in vitro neutralization assay, in which what we do is when we are infecting the cells with the virus that we isolated from patient and cultured in the reasonable amount so that we can use them for infection. If you add a serum from the person who has been infected earlier and recovered and therefore has the potential antibody, or the serum from the person who has been vaccinated with the Covishield, both the doses and after a couple of weeks, both these serums are able to stop the virus from infecting the cells at a reasonable dilution. While you add the serum of uninfected person, where the person has not been infected before and has not been vaccinated, that serum does not prevent the virus, and that's why virus is infectious. So all things in place. So this means that the Covishield will be protecting against the double variant in a reasonable way. And so in other words, double variant doesn't matter for the Covishield. I suspect, rather I expect Covaxin to behave in the same way. We'll coming week or two, we will know for that also. We have set up those experiments. But the ICMR data does indicate that Covaxin will be effective against the double variant, though that observation is from different too. So far, that's what I've been trying to say, that we've been lucky that we have not seen a variant which is very dangerous in terms of mortality or clinical symptoms or denying the vaccine protection that we are generating. Or one more observation I would like to add is that we don't see many reinfection in the case, in fact, very rare reinfection of double variants so far from the data that we have, which means this virus is still respecting the immunity that is generated by the first round of infection, and therefore the vaccine should be successful. But I want to repeat the same thing, that we have been lucky so far, but now the number that we have of infection, we are giving a huge field to play for this virus, and it can come now with the variants on this patient platform of double mutant or UK variant and create trouble for us. And one thing is certain at the same time, before I finish, that so far, and more or less we can guarantee that no variant will come which will be able to penetrate the mask. So that's the best tool that we have got. And you can see all the experts are emphasizing only one thing, just doesn't matter which variant. Let the variant be dealt by scientists and clinicians and figure out vaccine and those kind of things, understand biology. Let's do what we can do. Let's ignore everybody else, everything else, and wear the mask. Do hand hygiene and social distancing. Don't go in crowd. We will win. If we don't do that, even vaccine will fail.
Sure. Dr. Shahid Jamil, you know, the word luck is being used very often in this broadcast, that we are lucky that the Indian variant and the UK variant hold out against the vaccine, and that the vaccine holds out against these variants, and that they don't skip the antibodies that you've created. How long does this business of mutation go on for? Sorry for what may seem like a very layman-like question, but how long will this virus keep mutating? Does it potentially keep getting more dangerous, and is there an end period to when these mutations then become more gentle, or they neutralize the danger that the virus poses? And how does that process play itself out?
Yeah, so all viruses, when they mutate, they don't necessarily mutate to a more dangerous, more lethal, more contagious, more infectious virus. The space for a virus to mutate is also limited. It can only change so much before it starts negatively impacting the virus also. So what is really going on right now is that this is a new virus in the human population. It is trying to adapt to the human population. And as it adapts to the human population, it will reduce its virulence. Remember, one very important fact is that a dead human or a very sick human is of no use to a virus. A dead human or a very sick human who is immobilized in a hospital will not be running around transmitting the virus. So ideally, if you were a virus and your aim is to propagate yourself, you would want to make the human either not sick at all, which is asymptomatic, or very mildly sick. You don't want to make the human severely ill and definitely not dead. So this is going towards modulating its virulence. But in the process, since this is a new virus to the human population, our immune system has never seen this virus. And that is why we are seeing all this disease and all this mortality. It will eventually go out and become a fairly harmless virus like other coronaviruses. How long that will take, I can't predict. I don't think anyone on this panel can predict this.
Okay, the big question that people have in their minds is, how long is this wave of the coronavirus likely to last for? When are we likely to hit a peak, and when will the number of cases start coming down? There are no known answers for certain, but mathematical modelers and biostatistics experts at the University of Michigan in the United States have put out latest data which suggests that by about the middle of peak, by the middle of May, the number of COVID cases should start peaking. Take a look at this report.
The second coronavirus wave has got a vice-like grip on India. The virus has become more contagious and is spreading like wildfire across the country. The one question we're all asking is, when will this end? More importantly, when will we see the peak of this current wave? The reproduction metric in India, which shows you how fast the virus is spreading in the current second wave, paints a very grim picture. And if the current spread is anything to go by, the COVID curve isn't flattening anytime soon. Experts say that the current COVID spike will continue for another 2 to 3 weeks. It's estimated that cases will peak by mid-May and then will gradually come down.
I think we need more data to really come up with accurate projections, but right now, the early part of May is when Maharashtra is showing to be peaking in many of these models, and then India, depending on what happens in other states.
The biggest worry of this second COVID surge is the virus variants that are spreading. The virus has mutated fast in India, and we're still learning about so many variants that have emerged. Take, for example, the scary Vidarbha variant in Maharashtra. The new strain, which was first seen in Amaravati district, has spread to Nagpur and cases have surged since in the district. It's more contagious, but fortunately less lethal than the current strains already present in India.
एक आदमी को इन्फेक्शन हुआ और कुछ कारण से लोगों ने ज़्यादा पसंद किया होम क्वारंटाइन और पूरी की पूरी फैमिली इन्फेक्ट हो गई। कई सारे मरीज ऐसे थे कि एक एक फैमिली से 5-5, 6-6 मरीज आते थे, जिसमें कुछ लोग तो घर में अच्छे हुए, कुछ लोगों को एडमिशन लगी, जिसमें काफ़ी सारा एक यंग क्लास भी था जिनको शुरू में लगा कि उनको कुछ होने वाला नहीं है, लेकिन बाद में पता चला कि अभी सीरियस कंडीशन है, तो भागते भागते हॉस्पिटल घूमते थे।
The second coronavirus wave has shown us that we still have a lot to learn about this virus, as new variants have made it difficult for authorities to treat and track cases in the country. Bureau Report, India Today.
Dr. Soumitra Das, people who are watching this broadcast have been messaging, and one of the questions that I've been asked is there something that's changed about the nature of the virus which creates a greater lag between when you meet someone who has the infection and when you start showing symptoms? Earlier we were told that it takes between 5 to 6 days for symptoms to start showing up. Now there have been cases that we've come across where people have been locked up indoors, haven't met anyone from whom they could have got the virus, and the last exposure they had to somebody who was positive was actually 10 to 14 days ago. So has the period between coming in touch with somebody and the infection actually showing up through symptoms in your body increasing, and is there any data that you have to pick that up, Dr. Das?
So we don't have really a data, but what we can speculate is essentially the what we call genetic determinant or innate immunity of individuals varies. So as and when as the time passes on, our exposure to these pathogens is increasing, and to some extent we are acquiring some immunity, which we actually probably resisting little better. Another thing, so it is actually having two components. One is the mutations in the virus, which probably, which we are discussing, that may sometimes help in rapid replication. Sometimes it has a crosstalk with the host that might be a little bit compromised because of the mutations. That might have a delay. The other thing is our resistance, or the body resistance, has somehow acquired a little better, and then we are fighting better, and that's how the delay is happening. Partly because of the indirect exposure for a longer time help to increase your immunity, overall immunity of the body. Does that explain?
Okay, Dr. Shahid Jamil, yeah, it does. What, according to you, is it that people need to most take care of? Because this mutation of the virus is frankly beyond anybody's control. Which way it goes, what happens, is beyond anyone's control. We saw in that report biostatisticians predicting that the number of cases could peak in the middle of May, which is still about 3 weeks away. Is that your best sense also, or do you think it could be a longer haul before the virus starts coming under control?
Well, Rahul, I am not a modeler, and I am someone who firmly believes that all models are wrong, but some models are useful. You have to remember that models are based on assumptions, and if the data on which the model is based is correct, and if the assumptions are correct, then the models will predict properly. If you don't have good data and if you don't have good trends, then it's very difficult to provide good estimates. Now, Dr. Mukherjee, who was on the show in the clip that you showed, is talking about estimates of about 8 to 9 lakh cases every day by the peak time in the first or second week. There are other estimates that are talking about somewhere around 4.5 to 5 lakh cases. Now, of course, these numbers are alarming, and almost everyone believes that the numbers are going to go up further before they start coming down. However, some people believe that once the peak is reached, the fall is going to be very sharp, whereas others think that after the peak, the fall is also going to be gradual. Now, it remains to be seen. We don't know when the peak will happen, The peak will have, once the peak is crossed, only then we will know that the peak has happened. So again, I would say, all this depends on our behavior. Yes, the virus is infecting faster. Yes, the virus is moving through the population faster. But the other component of this, which is our behavior, if we alter that, then we can reduce the march of the virus. And that's why I keep saying that, don't bother yourself sick about this variant or that variant. Just wear proper masks and wear them properly. That's very, very important. Each one of us can contribute to bringing the
Dr.
peak
Ganga Khetkar,
down.
your best sense of whether the fall will be sharp, will it be a gradual fall? On the basis of all the evidence that you're seeing, what's your sense of when the peak will be and what that peak could look like?
See, let me put it simply. No, it's very difficult to actually predict what would happen. I'll tell you why. One of the things which we have to realize is the diversity that we tend to have. If there are areas which are population dense and if there is a rapid onset of outbreak, you might find that the fall can be sharper. Because you have almost infected a large majority of those who could be vulnerable and get exposed. However, this kind of a picture will perhaps get masked to a larger extent subsequently, because majority of your population continues to live in rural area, and in rural areas, because the population is sparse enough, the population density is low, you don't expect that the curve will come down dramatically. That's number one. Second thing which I would say is, though we tend to give lot of importance to number of people who are found positive, we must also remember that the test positivity rate tends to differ across. I can't just merge all those figures and come out with a sense saying that this is likely to fall very quickly or likely not to fall very quickly. Third thing which we have to understand, in these numbers, even if I was to consider test positivity rate, there are non-essential tests that are also being done for travel purposes. If I want to go from one place to another, I need to take that test report which is negative. It is more likely that the person may be found negative over those who are symptomatic and need testing, or those who have been exposed and they need testing. And their mix, their proportions of those who actually were tested by this group with these two different proportions that could actually exist determines, the test positivity rate. So what should we do? One thing which we have to understand is, if we look at all the curves that are seen across, by and large, from the beginning of the infection to a decline, every country tends to show that they spend about 3 to 4 months time in that particular zone. You will find that this entire approach as to how it will decline also depends on whether you would have calibrated lockdowns that would be applied in different parts of the districts or states, how many of them they would perhaps constitute those which would have calibrated lockdown. And the second issue, which is also important, is, would people reduce their mobility by themselves? What proportion does reduce that mobility? And also the proportion of people who would ensure that they adhere to COVID appropriate behaviors. So perhaps, one thing which we need to understand is, in the second wave, we shouldn't look at the numbers, but perhaps we have to look at the adverse outcomes after hospitalization that we need to worry about. If the number of deaths keep on increasing, that becomes a bigger issue. The other numbers may not be as much important, and I would continue to believe that no matter what we do, the worst case scenario would be, from the initiation of the curve to the decline, I may have to spend 4 months' time.
Okay, so this has been a very, very useful conversation, because we've kept all the netas away, we've kept all the tutu meme away, we've had a very serious and insightful discussion, and to my mind, the most useful takeaway is this: that there's only a little control that we have over where the virus goes and what it does and how it mutates, because that's completely out of our control. The control that we have is on our own mobility, on our own behavior, on whether we've got our masks on, whether we're washing our hands, whether we are doing what we can to keep the virus at bay. If we did everything that is possible, then a lot of these numbers will start falling, because that's what the virus doesn't want. So it's an enemy that's out to get us. We have to keep our guard up. And for the work that you all are doing, Dr. Rakesh Mishra, Dr. Soumitra Das, thank you so much for the effort you and your teams are making, and thank you for joining us. Also, Dr. Ganga Khetkar and Dr. Shahid Jameel, really a pleasure to have had you on this special broadcast to talk about the virus, its mutations, its changing form, and really a lot to learn over the last 45 minutes. Thank you, sir.
Hello everyone, this is Rahul Kamal here. Hope you enjoyed this video. For the latest news and analysis, like and subscribe the India Today YouTube channel, and don't forget to press the bell icon to stay updated.